So this question's a 12 marker and it's asking us to discuss how far sociologists would agree that the main role of education is to meet the needs of capitalism. Now I've already selected the key parts of this question that I'm going to think about, thinking about the role of education and capitalism. And I also know that in a discuss how far sociologists would agree that style question, I'm going to explain one side of the debate, I'm going to assess it, and then present other sides of the debate and assess them. And I'm going to come to a conclusion as to how far. Now, one of the things that we need to keep in mind with this is that in this type of question, you're looking at getting AO1, AO2, and AO3 marks. So you need to be showing a range of knowledge and understanding about the idea of capitalism, the education system meeting capitalist needs, and then also evaluation of that from other angles to show that you've got some analysis, okay? And when we look at that, we're probably thinking of some traditional approaches, some of the most basic and traditional sociological perspectives that we can talk about when we answer this question. So, when I think about the needs of capitalism, immediately I'm thinking about Marxist sociologists. So we know that Marxists, they don't like the idea of capitalism, but they believe lots of things in society structure are geared up to meet the needs of a capitalist system. So my first paragraph is going to be outlining the basics of that. So here I've got it. I've said, Marxist sociologists would see the main role of education being to serve the needs of a capitalist society. By passing on the ideas and beliefs that benefit the ruling class, the education system continues to serve the interests of capitalism. Marxists would view that by falsely creating a sense that the system is fair and meritocratic, the proletariat are kept in their oppressed position in a capitalist society. So, things that I've done in this paragraph that are important, I've brought in some key terms, I've given a type of sociologist a perspective, talk about Marxism, and also the most important part is I've used the language from the question. Okay, if you're linking back, then you've not gone off track, so you need to keep them links in each paragraph. Now, the next thing I need to do, we've looked at here at the bottom, is the idea of contrasting, showing some analysis, showing some assessment. So I need to analyse this, I need to offer a contrasting point of view. I'm going to put in a connective that shows I'm showing some level of contrast. My connective I'm going to use is despite this, and then I'm going to talk about what functionalists might believe. We know that Marxists and functionalists traditionally argue against each other, and you can find a debate between both of them perspectives. So here I've got, despite this, other sociologists, such as functionalists, see the education system as serving the needs of the economy. They believe that rather than creating a capitalist structure in which the proletariat are oppressed, that the system creates a group of future workers with the skills needed to compete in a global economy. These skills allow all to have an equal chance of success competing against each other. Things that I've done in this paragraph, I've thought about mentioning the basics of functionalism, talking about it giving the system giving people these skills that they need, and I've also linked in this bottom sentence back to the idea of meritocracy. So I'm saying functionalists see that it gives a system where everyone has an equal chance of success competing against each other. Now, I need to go back to the Marxist view and I need to put in some key thinking. I'm after some sociologists I could use. So sociologists I could talk about here are Bowles and Gintis, key Marxists, okay? So I'm saying, in contrast to the key functionalist beliefs, Marxist thinkers Bowles and Gintis believe that for reproducing an obedient and hard-working and disciplined workforce that do not challenge authority, the education system simply serves to prepare a group of wage slaves that are ready to be exploited without question, supporting the capitalist structure. So I'm using language from the question. I'm talking about capitalism. I'm talking about this idea that people are, in the Marxist way of thinking, people are drilled into being obedient, hardworking, disciplined, not challenging authority. And it's these things that help maintain a capitalist society. Now, I'm going to be after some contrast from there. And the bit of contrast I'm going to use is quite clever because it's going to come from inside Marxist thinking. I'm going to use Paul Willis. So, Paul Willis, a key Marxist, sees issues with Bowles and Ginz's approach here. He sees that the education system fails to reproduce an obedient workforce. In his research of a group of working class lads moving from school to work, he noted that many members of the group challenged authority and were not obedient. Despite this, the lads, he calls them lads in his research, within this research still ended up in roles that served a capitalist society, being confined to manual labour which served the ruling class. So, in my original paragraph on this slide here, you can see I've talked about this obedient, disciplined workforce, and Marxists seeing the proletariat as wage slaves within this. And now I've offered some contrast from inside Marxism to say that actually Paul Willis, who is a key Marxist, has problems with this. And he sees that actually people aren't drilled to be so obedient because some young people reject the values of the education system and act against them, challenging authority. Now, I'm going to be after something that's going to contrast against this again before we start in a moment on our next slide to look at the conclusion. So, in challenging this, I'm going to use postmodern thinkers. Okay? So I'm saying here postmodernist theorists would challenge the view that the education system serves capitalism in noting that this traditional Marxist view of society, which is based on two social classes, is outdated. They see that rather than promoting obedience, that the education system teaches a vast range of skills needed in an ever-changing economy. And then I'm going to reach my conclusion. The key to my conclusion is I'm going to use the language of the question. In conclusion, the view that the education system's main function is to serve the needs of capitalism is outdated. There have been many changes in the system, especially in recent years, which promote diversity and choice. These changes have served to create a more equal and meritocratic system, not the traditional capitalist structure. So in my conclusion there, I've used the language from the question. Remember, if you can't link back, then you might have gone off track. So here, I'm staying on track with the question by linking back actively in this conclusion. Now, your conclusion, please don't feel that you can share your opinion in there. You're only going to really be credited for comments that are based on real sociological theory. You might be tempted to say, I believe or I think at the end, but actually use something that you can lean upon that's actually from the course, that's actually based on real sociological theory. Here it might be a point that you don't necessarily agree upon, but you're using it as a conclusion to wrap up your essay. And that's how we are to tackle this 12 marker.